The dusty town of Redstone lay quiet under the scorching noon sun, its wooden sidewalks creaking beneath the weight of gossip and judgment that travelled faster than any stagecoach rolling through the desert plains. And on this particular day, all eyes turned toward the edge of the main street where a young woman stumbled into sight, her clothes little more than tattered rags hanging loosely on her frame, her face streaked with travel dust, her hair tangled by the merciless wind. And the moment she appeared, the murmurs rose like wildfire, laughter echoing from the saloon porch, from the blacksmith's corner, from the cluster of ladies fanning themselves outside the general store, because in a town obsessed with appearances her arrival seemed like the punchline of some cruel joke. Yet beneath the mockery there was a sharpness in her eyes, a quiet determination that no amount of torn cloth could hide. And while they laughed at the rags, they missed the truth, that she carried with her a story deeper than their shallow judgments could fathom. And it was in that moment, when the jeers rang loudest, that a tall figure pushed open the swinging doors of the saloon, his spurs chiming against the boards as he stepped into the sunlight. A cowboy known across the territory not for wealth or land, but for his unshakable sense of honor. And as he looked at her, he didn't see rags, didn't see shame, he saw strength, the kind that wealth could never buy. And with a slow smile he tipped his hat and said in a voice steady as the desert wind, "She's rich enough for me." And the street fell into stunned silence, for no one had expected him, the cowboy who could have courted any lady in town, to stand by the side of a stranger, draped in tatters. Yet his words carried a weight that silenced mockery and forced every eye to reckon with their own cruelty. And though the townsfolk tried to disguise their shock with whispers, the woman straightened her back, her chin lifting with a quiet dignity. For the first time since stepping into Redstone, she felt she wasn't alone, and that moment, simple, powerful, marked the beginning of a story that would change not only her fate, but the heart of the cowboy himself, though neither of them yet knew the trials, betrayals, and tests of courage that lay ahead. Because destiny in the West never unfolded gently. It came with dust storms, with bullets, with choices that cut to the bone. And as the town stood frozen in judgment, the bond between a rag-clad stranger and a cowboy of honor had just been struck, like a spark against flint, ready to ignite into something far greater than any of them imagined. The morning after that unforgettable moment on Redstone's dusty street, the town still buzzed with whispers of the cowboy's bold words. "She's rich enough for me," for never before had anyone dared to stand against the sneering laughter of the townsfolk with such simplicity and conviction. And while many dismissed it as a reckless act of gallantry, there were others who felt a strange unease stirring within their conscience, because in truth they had seen something in the young woman's eyes, a fire that ragged clothes could not smother. And as the sun rose higher, painting the wooden rooftops gold, the saloon doors opened again, and the cowboy, Ethan Cole, known for his unyielding sense of justice, stepped out with the woman at his side, her name now revealed to be Clara. And though the rags still clung to her frame, her posture carried a quiet dignity that seemed to shame those who had mocked her the day before, for in her silence was a strength that no laughter could diminish. And together they walked the length of the street, his stride steady, her head held high. And though they had spoken little since that first exchange, an unspoken trust had already begun to weave between them, fragile yet undeniable. And as they passed the watchful eyes of the townsfolk, Ethan's hand rested near the grip of his revolver, not out of violence but as a warning that any insult toward Clara would be an insult toward him. And this silent promise did not go unnoticed. For in Redstone, alliances were everything, and the sight of a cowboy throwing his weight behind a ragged stranger set tongues wagging. In every corner of the county, but beyond the gossip, deeper shadows stirred. For in Clara's past lay secrets that would not stay buried forever, and in Ethan's future loomed choices that would test his very soul. And so it was that when they reached the edge of town and Ethan saddled his horse, He turned to Clara, with eyes narrowed against the blazing light, and asked the question that had burned in his mind since yesterday. "Why Redstone? Why here?" And Clara, her voice soft but steady, answered with words that carried both sorrow and steel. "Because the man who destroyed my family lives here, and I will not leave until justice is done." And in that instant, Ethan realized that her rags were not the garments of poverty alone, but the battle scars of survival, and her journey into this town was not one of chance, but destiny, a destiny that now intertwined with his own, for he knew the name she would soon speak, a name etched in blood and betrayal across his own past. And as their gazes locked in the golden morning light, the promise of a fight far greater than either of them had imagined took root. A fight not only for justice, but for dignity, for redemption, and perhaps, if fate allowed, for love. And though the path ahead would be riddled with danger and sacrifice, Ethan tightened the strap on his saddle and said, "Then you won't walk it alone." And with that vow, the bond sealed itself deeper, echoing across the silent desert like a prophecy yet to be fulfilled. And dear listener, as their journey deepens with trials and triumphs, remember that every story like this carries lessons of courage and love. So if this tale has gripped your heart and you want to see where it leads, make sure to subscribe now, because the next chapter of Clara and Ethan's fight for justice is one you won't want to miss.